LisbonTalks Universidade Lusófona. Conversations around the diversity of Portuguese cinema and the festival's focuses and retrospectives. In this edition, dedicated to new trends, subgenres, and ways of making cinema. Welcome to the LisbonTalks Universidade Lusófona. Today we're here with a sort of conversation around one of the cooperations with the festival that has happened this year with FILMar, a project led by the Portuguese Cinematheque, which was also one of the opening sessions of the festival this year, where we screened 2 Portuguese films that were recently restored, Zéfiro by José Alves and Albufeira by António de Macedo. They were shown pretty much, they are completed days before, pretty much, yeah. And so, sort of continuing the conversation that Tiago began when presenting the films at the festival earlier at the end of April, we're sort of having guests that are sort of correlated with the project and that are going to talk a bit about this restoration and films that are coming back and having seen like they've never been seen before. So enjoy. Thank you so much for coming.
Good afternoon. I'm Ricardo, and I'll be just moderating. So I'm not going to speak very much. I'm just making questions and trying to have our partners explain what this project of FILMar is. So maybe my first question for Tiago, Bartolomeu Costa, the guy on the left. Who is here representing the Cinematheque Portuguese, would be just to explain us how this project came to be from these EEA grants and what they are, and so it's the second year of 3 years. So what has been done and what will happen in the next few months before it ends? And what will happen afterwards?
Yes, so thank you, Ricardo, thank you, Luís, and also I would like to thank on behalf of Cinematheque the warm welcoming that Indie Lisboa has provided us, and to the 2 films that opened on the official opening session last Thursday, this project, and I also would like to thank the presence of Carlos Dias, one of our most close partners on the digitization and preservation of the projects, and Kjell Jenssen, who is our partner in Norway, and of course Ricardo, who sorry, I'm almost co-presenting, but giving back to Ricardo, who's been very helpful on identifying some of the titles and also asking the right questions about certain films. The FILMar project is a project that is developed under the frame of the financial mechanism that was created by Norway together with Iceland and Liechtenstein, who in many fields of expertise. In Portugal there are 5. Culture is one of them. The other is environment, health, defense, and civic society, social society. How do you say sociedade civil? The third sector. Let's put it like this. And in each area there are different projects, and in the cultural area there are 3 projects. One of these projects is run by Cinematheque and has the responsibility until the middle of 2024 to identify, digitize, and preserve at least 10,000 minutes of film, sea-related film. So a heritage that is under the responsibility of Cinematheque, and in this 10,000 minutes we are about 7,000 for long features and 3,000 for short features. It doesn't matter if it is fiction or documentary or other genres. The importance is that they are all sea-related and they are heritage sea-related. And we are doing it together with the Norwegian Film Institute, not only in terms of identifying the titles, but also on cooperating in exchanging different techniques and apprentissage of how to digitize films. And so this project has allowed Cinematheque to build a laboratory with up-to-date technique that will be then become part of the working reality of Cinematheque, and after 2024 will officially be available to digitize other films. But the main contribution of this project is to create opportunities for us to rediscover certain films that, because they are sea-related, they allow us to reread the film history, and particularly the Portuguese film history. So our main goals are actually to try to understand in what way this entire cycle of production, a more private one, where we identify the titles, see in which conditions they are, create the proper environment for these films to be restored and digitized, and then creating opportunities for them to be presented, like the one we've just had here in Lisboa, and together with the festivals, but also during the regular programming, but particularly with the festivals, and particularly with their different approaches and knowledges of their own audiences. In what way can we rediscover opportunities to reintroduce these films into a regular circuit of exhibition? And then there are the things that we are going to do, particularly or starting with Norway, that have to do with having a retrospective of some of the titles, both here in Portugal and then in Norway, in both the Cinematheques, but then in different cities of the two countries. But also by exchanging this expertise, how can we create opportunities of work for the technicians in both countries? Because every Cinematheque has a different way of approaching what the digitization process might be and what to do with the aftermath of the digitization. And so Cinematheque, the Portuguese Cinematheque, is known for its artisanal, most cerebral approach, in which you try to recreate the experience of seeing the film, even though it is in its digital form, seeing the film as close as it was the experience of those seeing it in its original format, let's put it like this. Other Cinematheques have other approaches that are related with the audience's experiences to restored film. So this is also an opportunity for us to understand in what way this new hype of restored films now being part of the regular circuit. How do you introduce through these questions and through this topic, how do you introduce these questions into what should be a normal conversation when talking about your film heritage?
Thank you, Tiago. And maybe trying to continue this cooperation with the Norwegian Film Institute, Kjell has some surprise for us. But maybe before that, just tell us how has this partnership been happening, and how and what has been the contribution of the Norwegian Film Institute to this project of FILMar.
First of all, thank you very much for letting us be a part of this, because Norway has a long coastline like you do, so a lot of our film production has been around the coastline and things connected with the coast, the fisheries and the life along the coast. So it's another way of looking at our film heritage to find those specific films. So we have right now doing a collection of films. We recently got a guy called Hans Berge, who's one of our earliest film documentaries producer. He made film from around 1910 to the middle of the 30s, and mostly along the coast, like fisheries and stuff. And we already screened one of his films, herring fishing.
Last October, during the Doc Lisboa, we showed this film. Yes.
Yeah, it's from 1915, and it's part of the time when the herring was abundant along the Norwegian coast. You can see it in the film. They are wading like up to their thighs in herring on the boat. They are fishing more than they can handle. And the problem is that 10 years later, there was no more herring outside the Norwegian coast. So this is one of the topics I think we'll get into later in the project, is this what happens, also what can we learn from the history, not only the film history, but film history is a way of learning history too. So, when we dug deeper into this Hans Berge collection, we found this film just a couple of days ago. And we didn't know. We did know that Hans Berge shot a lot in Norway, and he traveled to the States to screen what he has filmed. But we didn't know he was traveling to Portugal and shooting here. So this film is something, and it's been degraded, so I think we can talk about the state of the film and what has to be done. But what we really need to find out is more about the film. We don't know anything. We didn't even know that he was in Portugal. And we are guessing that this film is from the early 20s, but I don't know. Maybe some of you can help us identify what we are seeing on the screen. And this is a secret screening. It's not going to be part of what we see on the web later.
So you want to explain that what you are going to see is something that no one has ever seen outside of Norway, and you are the only ones who are going to see it. It's not even going to be seen on the broadcast of this talk. And the premiere of the restored version of this film will only happen later this
in October in
Poland. And of course that we will introduce it in our screenings here in Portugal, but Kjell trusted us with this. Just a funny story, I received an email this morning from my colleagues there at the Cinematheque asking, do you know anything about this email that was a request for identification? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I just learned before entering that what this film was going to be about. So this is like the first time that we're going to be
probably, as you can see, the film has a lot of issues, but it hasn't a lot of stripes and stuff. So it's probably not much screen at the original time either. So maybe it wasn't screened at all. We don't know. So just let us watch this film. It's only 7 minutes long, and I'll translate the Norwegian's intertitles for you.
Okay.
See you in 5 minutes.
It's from the collection of Hans Berger. Busako Park looks like a sea of green with its abundance of trees and bushes. It's surrounded of a wall with 9 entrances. In the middle of the park, there's a big castle with gun turrets on the roof. A very artful and very elegant building. From the many springs, there's crystal clear water, and the largest of these springs is the Vieira fountain. Children's dancing in the village. Jens.
So, Kjell, tell us what this print is. So, is these colors were then painted?
This is a nitrate print, as you can see, and it's degraded as nitrate print does if it's left alone for too long in the can, and it's sort of damaged to beyond the repair, as you probably can say, but it's still interesting, and the colors are it's a process called stencil coloring, so it's not tinted, it's hand on each frame, so it's a time-consuming process.
No, it's really amazing to see. I don't know, from you, I would say it's 20s or early 30s, maybe mainly because of the car that we see at some point, and I would say
yes, we wouldn't get many other informations besides the car and the clothing, because the Bussaco Palace still exists exactly like this, and it's preserved in all its marvelness. So the forest is still there. It's a preserved area, so we wouldn't be able to identify it unless the car. So we need to ask a car expertise in what, because we do understand that by this, what we might infer is that this is a private visit, and that this is probably a family with wealth. Otherwise they wouldn't have a car, and otherwise they wouldn't have, the children wouldn't be dressed like this. And the Bussaco used to be rented by industrials in order to have their either weddings or their corporate, what we now call corporate meetings. They would happen there in Bussaco. So it probably has to be related in some sort of way with who invited Hans Berger to come here to film. So if it is possible to trace it to, I don't know if there are diaries of his work, but we might try to find, but it will take some time. But it certainly has to. You wouldn't get to Bussaco, which is, if today is not of easy access, back then you wouldn't get there just by finding it by hazard. You would need to know how to get there, and you would need to have access to the interior of this monument. Otherwise, I mean, it's still a private place.
And we were thinking, he shot a lot of stuff in the 10s, but because of the car, maybe the early 20s, but maybe the late 10s. But then the world was in war, so it was difficult to travel.
So he has to have been here invited by someone. It's the only possibility to understand that in the middle of this forest and in that palace, to go with an equipment which is not an easy equipment to take. You would need means, otherwise you wouldn't get there. But how did you find this film?
Well, we have this big collection we got from the Hans Berger estate. So we are going through the cans one by one and trying to identify what they are. So if you saw on the title card, it was numbered. So all the cans are numbered, and so this is just the can was open recently.
By chance.
Yeah.
So maybe there can be more films that he shot in Portugal.
It could be. We are not through the collection yet, so we can find more. Maybe some sea-related stuff.
Yes, one of the wonders of this project is we know that there is a close relation with Norway due to the fishing industry. We also know that there is one film in particular which that Cinematheque had already restored before FILMar began, which was a commission by the city of Ilhavo, who commissioned the only fictional film that traces the voyage of the codfish endeavor, and this was on the 1950s. And we have many other films that are documentary-based films, but it is interesting to understand that our relation with Norway is we've never shot in Norway. We haven't yet found films shot in Norway. We filmed all the process of going to the Norwegian Sea to produce the fishing, to do the fishing. But so we have several films, and one of the questions that we've been raising is, what is the importance of these films for the knowledge of Norway on their capacity of attracting other countries and the industrial development of these other countries. So the same question has to be posed to Norway. In what way do we know if they shot in Portugal, or do they have any sort of history? And since we do not know that, we go through another hypothesis, which is, the fact that the two cinematheques are partners and therefore interested on the same topics. And from this dialogue, you might come to find a common filmography that will allow us to understand the impact that sea had on the production of on the production and on the development of film industry. But this is something that it was not predicted at the beginning of the project. All this theoretical approach, it was only a technical approach, just the restoration and the digitization. But since this is what Cinematheques already do, let's take a step deeper and try to see if there are histories that have not yet been told, and that through the restoration of this project, of these films, we will be able to know better.
So to include Carlos in this conversation,
He's included.
Maybe I would ask, just so Carlos Almeida is from the Irma Lúcia lab, a digital lab, not an analog one, and has been working with Cinematheque for many years, doing digital interventions in their digital copies. So, two questions. Maybe, how has this partnership with Cinematheque been working? Because before you did other work that were not related with preservation and film history in a way. And how would you approach this film we've just watched, and what do you think it can be done so it's as close as it can be to the original print?
Well, maybe I would start by your last question. I would start by saying, as a principle, it's important for people to see film in their native medium. It's very important for all of us to keep seeing film projected. Unfortunately, this is becoming more and more difficult as commercial cinemas don't have the ability to show film anymore, and this is mainly dedicated to museums and even in museums and cinematheques or around the world, the exhibition of film is being highly diminished because film is very expensive. There is only one manufacturer of film still working, and each year Kodak announces that he's going to close. So there is always this cloud hanging over our heads. And this is where the digitization process enters. Digitization is a sub-product of the film, and it's the only way we can promote and show films to a massive audience. Like we just saw this, it would be impossible for you to come here with a nitrate can and show it here. It would
illegal too. Illegal.
Illegal. It would.
It's highly flammable. So.
Yeah, you would put fire on this place, I would say you wouldn't do nothing here. You basically just digitize and show this as it is. Everything you would do here, any digital intervention here would be so aggressive that would be ethically and Cinematheques all over the world have the responsibility to have this ethical attitude towards their heritage. It's understandable that a producer, a commercial producer, would want to do a major digital intervention on such material in order to gain audience and take profit out of it. I have no problem whatsoever with that, as long as the works done are non-destructible, as long as you the principle of reversibility is assured. If you digitize something and you store the what you just digitized, then you can do whatever with that, as long as you store what you just digitized. Tools, restoration tools change each year. The tastes of this decade are ones. In the next decade, we will have other tastes and other approaches to restoration and to film. And so it's really important to keep the digitization. This is the most important thing, is that you digitize, that you have digitized this with the most quality you could. Going back to your first question, yes, it's true. My company is called Irma Lúcia. We initially started doing, we do image processing in a broad sense. So we work with advertising. We do 3D. I'm actually a teacher here at Lusófona in the course of digital animation, and I teach 3D here. We do a lot of post-production for films, for contemporary films, and we had a contact from Cinematheque many years ago regarding the restoration of one film in particular of Paulo Rocha, called The Green Years, Os Verdes Anos. It was a special project that needed some special skills. The anime and the Cinematheque at the time didn't have the resources to do the work. The work was being done in a former company called Tobish, which also closed. And so José Manuel Costa made me a personal challenge and told me, Carlos, would you like to consider to open a department just to handle the restoration? And we did. That's And this department has been growing. We are mainly involved now in digital restoration, and it's something that's much more enriquecedor, enriching, more than doing advertising, or that's for sure.
It's interesting, if I may, it's interesting what Carlos just mentioned about the ethical responsibilities of Cinematheque, as it's, many people are not aware that when we talk about the unethical decision on what to preserve, what to restore, what to digitize, has to do with two different things that operate at the same level. The first one is Cinematheques are museums, and therefore, like museums, need to assure that the conditions in which, for instance, we go to a museum to see a painting has to be equivalent to the conditions in which we go to a cinema room and see a film. The experience of seeing a film in its original or native form, it's as important as the emotions that the films transmit and make us have, because seeing a film is also understanding the technicalities that led to the existence of that material. So that's one thing. And therefore there are several cinematheques who, what they do is to create a digital copy based on the native form, the original form, and then discharge that original form, believing that the digital copy made today is gonna be enough to convey all the needs and all the technological developments that in 20 years from now we will require in order to see digital copies. What happens is that most of the times you do a digital copy of a digital copy that is already a digital copy of something, or you preserve the original one and make a copy that allows you to do as many copies as you want in the technology that exists at the moment, allowing you to have a much more wider experience and hence allow the film to gain another life that is not the life of a cinematheque, is the life of the commercial circuit and of the festivals. And this makes a difference in what are the ethical decisions that a cinematheque has to do in order to show certain films. Do they show it in its original copy, contributing to the deterioration of that copy, or do they make a new copy, showing it in the Cinematheque, but always explaining that what we are seeing is a subproduct, that a reproduction, and that allows you to have the experience, the emotional experience, but doesn't allow you to have the complete experience of being an active participant of what must have been the experience of those who saw it for the first time. And the goals of such project like FILMar, due to the material conditions in which we are all obliged to live, and the example that Carlos just stressed, the fact that we are allowed to see a digital version of a copy in nitrate that cannot leave the bunkers that exist in Norway, would not allow us to know what we just saw. And so the questions that are posed to Cinematheques is, what is it that you show? In what way are you going to show it? But in what way are you contributing to a wider knowledge? And for instance, what we've realized with the FILMar is that due to the fact that Cinematheque has now a laboratory dedicated until 24, dedicated to this project, will help Cinematheque already in what it is its daily reality of responding to requests of other cinematheques to restore their own filmographies, and by filmographies we are always talking about the identities, the cultural identities and the social identities of those countries, and therefore participating on belongingness and a sense of knowledge and being able to understand in what way a film participated in a certain artistic movement that therefore informs us of how the country has developed, has been developing. And so, for instance, when we talk about such a specific topic like the sea-related films, one would say that this is a sort of a, because we have this funding, which is a very generous funding of 1 million euros, we have this funding, okay, let's find a topic that serves the purpose considering the relation between Portugal and Norway. But in fact, what we've realized is that the first film that was ever shot in Portugal, the first film until today that we are aware that was the first film ever shot in Portugal was actually a film shot by the team organized by Henry Short, an equivalent of the Lumière, that went to Guincho and shot at Boca do Inferno. And so the first moving images that we have of Portuguese realness are sea-related. And so we are not making up a thread to convey the funding. It is actually necessary to reread the history of Portuguese, the history of film produced in Portugal through the lens of sea, because it is through that lens that we are able to understand in what way, for instance, what it is, not the conservative industry, the indústria conserveira. Conservative industry is another thing. The fish can industry, how the development of the urban development of certain coastal cities were of the responsibility of the fish can industry. Therefore, the migration fluxes that contributed to the development of the cities that were enhanced by ritualistic, either paganistic or religious rituals that helped to assure that there was a sense of community. And therefore, you are no longer talking about sea, you are talking about the identity of a country, you are no longer talking about film, therefore a technique, you are talking about the fixation and the possibility of having a story to tell, and therefore now having the possibility of seeing that story happening in front of your eyes. And through this thread, we're also able to understand in what way the sea does play an important role on the sharpening of our collective identity, particularly with the coincidence of the fact that cinema happening in a country that used the sea to impose itself to the world. And so these are topics that allow us to reread our entire knowledge about the Portuguese film history, but also our own knowledge about how cinema is a collective and social experience that makes us more close to our ancestors, but also to the way that they were part of history happening.
I can just contribute because the very first Norwegian feature film made, we don't know really, but around 1907, 1908, it's called The Danger of Being a Fisherman. And it just describes the death of a fisherman who drowns. So it's unfortunately lost, but we have these pictures from from it, so we know. So the first topic they reached for in Norway when it should make a fiction film was the fisherman. So it shows the importance of the industry.
And so now many of these films that are part of the FILMar project that are being digitized, they had already been preserved in analog form by the Cinematheque during the 90s and early 2000s. So most of them had already been restored and preserved via the laboratory of analog film that Cinematheque still has. And so at this point, the digital process, the digital copies are much clearer than they could have been, and the need for any kind of intervention is very low. What has been the workflow in Norway towards these kind of films?
Gone a little different route, because there are one particular director we are interested in restoring most of his legacy. He's dead now. It's called Øyvind Sandberg. He screened his Elmer and the Flower Boat at some point here.
On the first screening that we've done when we were allowed to begin the project, once the pandemic was apparently allowing us to to come together again, one of the first films that we shot was this film in particular, that is a sort of a biographical / documentary / utopical approach on in what way can a boat carrying flowers throughout the islands contribute to the sense of community, and therefore, if does not serve the main purpose of fishing, at least contributes to a sort of a memory.
Yeah, and Øyvind Sandberg, his director, he's made a lot of films concerning the vanishing things they do along the coast. We have talked to his wife, who's the care of the rights, but his stuff is just lying there, and it's not been restored in any way at any point. So we are starting with locating the best prints or the best sources for each film, and going from there to the digitization. And we're going to present a few more of his films. They are really interesting things. Fishing that's been dying out, really special kind of fishing is interested in.
Yes, it's important to add that the financing structure of this mechanism obliges, not that we are forced or contrived to, but creates the obligation of having a Norwegian partner. A Portuguese institution, in order to be funded, needs to have a Norwegian partner. And of course, for Cinematheque, the most evident partner has to be the correspondent one, the equivalent. And so what's interesting is to, besides the fact that all Cinematheques do collaborate in whatever needs they have different approaches on what to do with their archives. And some Cinematheques do preserve their archive, and that is why it is important that then in the civic society there are partners, stakeholders that can prolong, continue, and help Cinematheque, like Irmã Lúcia does, continue this work, in order for also us to be able to understand in what way can we share this experience with other other colleagues. And what we've realized with the Norwegian Film Institute is that they are completely independent in the way that they want to work with their films, as we are. But then there are moments of meeting in which we understand in what way our films can contribute to their history and vice versa. And also in what way this project that is a project that needs to create its roots here in Portugal becomes a sort of an independent body that is able to replicate this experience with other countries, with other stakeholders, and is able to gather, particularly in Portugal, is able to gather, to put together partners in the different fields and in the different points of this sort of a industrial approach, this technical approach. In what way can, for instance, Irmã Lúcia enter for which film at each part? In what way can a festival or a university? In what way can a mediation process, for instance, with children enter? How can we save archives and distinguish what we need to prioritize, not only based on the original format, but also on its social impact, but also on its regional, the regional aspects of certain films that allow us to balance the knowledge that we have of different regions. And so all of this participates on discussions that cannot put at the same level countries who have different approaches to not only to digitization, but also to the access of films.
Yeah. Just to follow up a bit, because the Norwegian archive, at least for the fiction films, the long films, they realized that digitization is not forever. So for each film they restore, they make a 35mm print, who's not for lending out, not for screening, it's just for preservation. So they have realized that 35 Kodak guarantees 200 years, a lifetime of a print. I don't know if it's true, but they say that
at the certain conditions, it should last at least that. Yes.
Yeah. And I know that the French on the French Cinematheque, they have gone a step further. And they make 3 prints of each film, 1 for each color.
Separation.
Yeah. So that's the most extreme and most expensive way of preserving.
Because technically, black and white film will last longer than a color film. So if you do separate the 3 colors, the RGB, and you print it out in 3 black and white prints, it will supposed to be lasting for a much longer time. Yes.
But if I can use some time here to tell a little story, because of the political impact restoration can have, because in 2010 the Norwegian Nobel Committee gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Louis Xiaobo, the Chinese dissident, and that was, a closed door for trade between Norway and China, and the most of that trade was fish. So it's a big blow for the Norwegian fishing industry, and it lasted for years. But in 2014. We discovered a print of Pansidong in the Norwegian archives. And Pansidong is one of the highlights of Chinese silent films. It's from 1927. It was the most expensive production at that time, and it's been lost since. It's a really big production with the biggest stars of Shanghai was the biggest Chinese industry. And we found that print, restored it, and presented it to the Chinese authorities. And this was the start of loosen up the connections with China and Norway. So the film can have a political impact too.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Maybe I just to ask Carlos, following the question I had made before. So if actually most of the digital processing that is done now is very little, because the prints have been mostly preserved, at least some films, or some films. There are also other films for which an analog approach would have never been able to recover some of the features of a film that had been lost. For instance, I'm just thinking of Verdes Anos, for instance, which had in the negative many scratches and very much use, mainly in the first sequence of the credits. But also, for instance, I think it was not Irma Lucia that did that job. I think it was Cinematheque, but all the coloring of the long version of The Bread, Pão, by Manuel Oliveira, which was something that could never have been done in an analog process. It had to be a digital approach. So if, of course, there are ethical boundaries for digital restoration, is that even a thing, in which way a digital approach can help bring a copy or a film that had lost something that now can be restored or recreated.
The idea of doing digital restoration is that you can appreciate a film without the interference that the film has. For instance, in the case you explained, Verdes Anos, it has a narrative. It's a film that has it's very well known. It was known that the film would also do a commercial circuit, and of course there is also a political side on all this. If you are able to present a restoration of a film like Verdes Anos, that will also cause an impact on the public, and this will also alert people for the importance of investing and restoring and conserve the heritage. So it's all together. I'm not sure if the decisions. I'm not taking these decisions. It's Cinematheque who's taking these decisions. I'm not sure that the decisions are only technical and are only mainly based on the quality of the materials. There are a lot of factors that contribute for a decision like that.
I think everyone accepts with more openness that a silent film, for instance, is shown in a digital copy that has a lot of scratches or a lot of pigment changes, and it's more difficult for an audience to accept that the first film of the new cinema, as Verdes Anos is, has the same conditions.
It's a good example. It's a good example, and mainly because audiences nowadays are much used to the digital cinema. They are not used to flickers anymore, to jumpings, to scratches. They resent that You cannot take a film in such conditions. For instance, if you want to show it in Cannes Classics or in Venice, or there's a standard that you somehow have to meet if you want that a film has this ability to be shown outside, for instance.
And maybe I would ask Tiago, because many of these films that are now being digitized by the Cinematheque are being shown in Portugal, of course, and not in Cinematheque, because they're the best. The idea would be to show the analog prints, so throughout the country. But also these films start to circulate through these parallel circuit of the restored film festivals throughout the world, and where many different approaches from many different cinematheques come together. And how have been these more puristic approach of the Cinematheque Portuguesa been received by, for instance, other festivals or other distributors outside Portugal?
Well, there are many answers to your question, and I would like to say that the first thing that Carlos was mentioning, the standards that one has to meet in order to enter the festival circuit, and particularly the A-list festival circuit, because the restored film section has become a trend and has become a sort of a validation of a festival towards its own memory. But most of the films that are being presented, despite the fact that there are very good copies, they are not you do not have the experience of seeing a film. You are seeing a completely blended, photoshopped film that doesn't show any trace whatsoever that was done by humans. It doesn't show the differences of lenses. It doesn't show the difficulty of the cuts. It doesn't show how photography used to be something that was dependent on the light conditions, and so therefore there are reasons for which films are darker than others. And also one has to understand that and has to have the memory that certain films were shot in studios, therefore the conditions in which they were shot are different than if the same sequences had been shot in an open air. All of this has to be taken into consideration when restoring a print. There are different ethical approaches to come to the same truth. And the truth is, what is the best way to show a film? Do you serve the purpose of a wider audience and therefore contribute to have the film accessible? Or do you want to make a history lesson each time you show a film? And in this project in particular, FILMar, which is a project that has a specific funding to restore films that are sea-related and has to contribute to the knowledge of the communities of their heritage, one has the possibility of taking the time to decide which films are going to be restored, and on this decision one also takes in consideration the impact that such film might have. For instance, I've come to realize that there are fewer films directed by women in the fewer films that were directed by women in the entirety of the Portuguese film story. And then I have to decide if the films that were directed by women are interesting enough to represent, because you need to make choices, to represent, let's say, the decade in which it was produced. And so what I need to do, just to give you an example on, an extreme example on all these questions need to attend, I need to create a context in which the choice that I'm making is sufficiently representative of all the questions that a film has to answer in order to justify the decision of prioritizing such film. The idea that a silent film, for instance, is more interesting to preserve than, let's say, a contemporary film also has to do not with ethical decisions only, but with the easiness of preserving a film where everyone that contributed to it is already dead. And therefore, the process will be easier because you will not have someone wanting to remake the film that they were not allowed to do back then. And so, for instance, one prioritizes films done by dead people. This is a joke, of course, but it is also a way of saying that the restoring of the restoring of a film is not a redoing of the film. One thing is, like with Verdes, which is a good example for everything we want to say, we know that there were certain scenes who were cut by the censorship. And it was not due to the decision of the producer or the director to cut those scenes back in the time, and now wanting to put those scenes back because this is the film I imagined to do. No, this is a film that had cuts due to a social and political system that did not want those scenes to be shown. And so, what we need to do, what was done then, is, okay, we will reintroduce these sequences on this film, always saying that the audience back in 1963 did not see these sequences. And so we are seeing a different film. The restoration process is not a process to redo the film, and therefore is not a process to retell the story. But it is a process of re-knowing the story. One of the ethical decisions that in FILMar we had to do, and we're still doing, and the films directed by women are one of the priorities, have to do with what is it that you do with films that were commissioned by the ministries during the dictatorship, which are the films that had the best conditions when compared to films that were done in the industrial circuit. Those films are extraordinary at several levels, but also are structured and filled with ideology. And therefore, you cannot just restore them and present them without knowing that this will produce an impact, and therefore you need to create a context. And so, what we've been trying to do, and it is true that by now, if everything had gone the right way, we were now at the middle of the project, because it should have started in February 2020 and end in February 2023. But due to the pandemic, we had to delay everything. And so the project was extended until April 2024. And this forced us to understand that as important as the films that were going to be restored, other films were not going to be. And so what is it that you do with those films? And in what way do you contribute to a discussion that is sort of a Darwinistic discussion, that something has to be left behind in order for others to perceive. But those films are as important as. And so we've created this sort of informal categories that are films that we know will have a commercial interest and produce a new cultural impact. And So we must. So the long features and the fictional long features are certainly on that level. Then you have other films that might contribute to mediation processes and with educational purposes, and so that have already been restored. And what we do is to create sort of a dossiers that will reread the history of those films. But also at the same time, there are certain films who will not have a commercial life. Most of them are the most interesting ones, which are documentaries about the fishing industry, the fish can industry, the films that were commissioned and serve touristic purposes. And for them to be presented, you need to either find, for instance, contexts in museums, and therefore help museums that have paintings or have objects for them to show how the objects that they have there have a history, and that history has been captured, and the ones that preserve that memory is Cinematheque, and therefore reintroduce these films in the museography of certain museums. And then there are films who just serve for common knowledge, let's say, and serve educational purposes for research. For instance, we are celebrating this year the 100th anniversary of the crossing of the North Atlantic, so from Gaco Coutinho and Sacadura Cabral. And Cinematheque has the films that were shot back in 1922 and then in 23, and then the celebrations that the dictatorship wanted to make in 1940, but also one film directed by the man who gives the name to this place, Fernando Lopes, who was commissioned by TAP, so the Portuguese flying company, to make a film called Cruzeiro do Sul, so the South Cruzeiro, also honoring Lauro Dermio, who invented words in English. So this commission by TAP was a commission that was supposed to connect the Columbus route to the landing of the man in the moon. And so Fernando Lopes shot a film about the traveling of Colombo, of course in 1968, with a lot of problems that today we need to discuss about post-colonialism and civilization and all of that. So again, several levels of ethical discussions. But what is interesting is that film, shot in 1968, is a commission, is one of the first films that Fernando Lopes ever did. It has an historical importance to its own filmography, to what a commission was, how the main history, the main Portuguese history, could connect to a commercial purpose, which is the opening of a commercial flight from Lisbon to New York, and therefore talking about technology and human development, technology done by humans, and so technological development that connects Columbus to film, to the moon. And so this film was chosen by the Navy, Academy. So I was requested to produce a screening of films for them to choose which films they wanted to present in a screening that is going to happen in the beginning of June to celebrate the crossing of the North Atlantic. And so I showed them, listen, we have all these films from 1922 that show, and they say, yeah, but we want the other ones. the ones that were made in 1968, the ones that were made in 1940 were made in 1968, that are not the original ones, but are the ones that contextualize, that use other terms that are more close to the terms that we are used to. And so, even though we as Cinematheque we restored these films and we thought that the Navy was going to be the immediate interested stakeholder, they said, no, we want the other ones. We want the ones that everyone knows, because these are the ones that people will. So what we've decided was to, besides the fact of organizing a public screening later in the year, we've decided to put these films in our website. And this made us question also in what way can we contribute to, by putting these films online, can we contribute for people that go there just by, an interest of, and suddenly opening a door and understanding that there are other films and that these films are were restored under the frame of FILMar, and FILMar understood that it could contribute to its own, to the role of the public role of Cinematheque, of having to invent ways of contributing for the accessing of people to film without creating ethical rules that would be an impediment for people to access this film. So creating these different levels, commercial circuits, museums, screenings, festivals, digitization for the website, providing films to colloquiums, suddenly opens up different possibilities of understanding your own the material for which you are responsible, but also forces you to create other ways for the restoration process to take place. Because it is different to restore, and Carlos can certainly explain it better, it is different to restore, to show it in a screen than to show it in to see it on a website, or to,
Maybe just to round the conversation, because I'm being let known that we are running a little bit over the time we had. I would just add that it's now the FILMar is the first step, I would say, for another major endeavor, which will be the complete or mostly complete digitization of the Portuguese cinema that is happening, that is starting now with the PRR funding. So these 10,000 minutes that FILMar already or will end up digitizing will be the first step of a much larger and
sort of.
Yeah.
We've decided, due to the coincidence of when FILMar was proposed back in 2016, we were not aware that a pandemic would come, nor, because of the pandemic, the European Union would need to organize itself and create resilience and investment plans for every country. And so FILMar was a project that should select from the archive of Cinematheque films that should be C-related and therefore contribute for the digitization and the accessibility of Portuguese cinema. When FILMar started, the pandemic came, and when the pandemic came, PRR was announced. And PRR has not yet started, but the experience of FILMar will certainly contribute for the speed up of all these ethical questions. How do you make decisions? How do you speed up decisions based on ethical purposes? There is one greater contribution that PRR forced Cinematheque to deal with and allowed FILMar to gain a sort of a ethical and social responsibility that has to do with the fact that since you cannot invent films, because you need to digitize films that exist, the priority before PRR was to digitize fiction and the most known titles. And of course, the most known titles always have a relation with the sea. What we've decided was, okay, let's focus on documentary, let's focus on short features, let's focus on films that will not have a commercial life, and take the opportunity with these films to contribute to a wider knowledge of our own history. Since PRR will make it in 3 years what should be the life, the regular life of a Cinematheque, what we've understood is, okay, we will select some long features, we will make them, we will prioritize some of these titles, but let us focus on films that can, like the ones that we've showed in the Lisboa, will not have a wider interest besides the importance that they will have to the communities, to the schools, to the research projects, to the festivals. And let's use this project to know better our history and leave, what is PRR to do, the festival of restored copies of Portuguese cinema.
So, thank you so much, Kjell. Thank you so much, Carlos and Tiago. Obrigado aos presentes. I don't think we really.
Sorry.
So it's thank you and see you next time.
Thank you.